Do you know what really bunnies my muffins? When you are running a Victor and the opponent also is running a Victor, but then their Victor casts first for some reason, completely ridiculous stuff. But in order to even get to the point where you can afford to have a Victor, we need to cover the top comps of the week. It is the second week of the B patch, and I am happy to say that we do have a new comp that I just added, Urgot Reroll. It is not a meme comp. People thought it was before, but there are actually viable ways to play it now. And no, you do not need the Hungry Crab or Hunger for Power anomaly. I forget what it's called. It's actually just a legitimate comp if you get the right spot for it. So we'll cover that in a bit. As for the S tier comps, some of them are really good because they can just be played every single game. So if you are one of those players that just want a one-trick a comp right now, I can think of no better comp than the Emissary Ambessa Corki comp. Other good candidates is maybe like Heimerdinger Flex, and if you're feeling lucky, you probably could one-trick Rebel Zoe. By one-trick, I don't mean like pure one-trick, because ever since they introduced augments, it's kind of hard to just purely one-trick something. But maybe 10 to 15 out of 20 games, so like 50 to 75% of your games, you could probably just hard force one of these comps up at the top. If you combine all three of them, like yeah, you don't need to play any other comp. But pretty much they're just all pretty solid, and if you know what you're doing with them, be my guest. But if you want to be a little more flexible, like some of the other comps in the S tier definitely are worth exploring. If you hit them, these are a bit rarer to get because they require specific augments. You need to get the reroll angle for them, or you need to do some sort of crazy Chem-Baron Cashout. Nocturne reroll, Chem-Baron Cashout, Renata, Dominator, and Kogmaw still are very, very good comps. I think these comps are better than the first three we went over if you hit them, but that's the big if, right? Like you have to hit them and you have to get like not perfect setups, but like pretty good setups. Whereas I think for these up here, you can kind of just play them and not really worry too much about anything. Whereas Nocturne with and without +1 range is like worlds of a difference. And if you checked out my recent coaching video, you'll know that there are big differences between each rank in TFT. And as we went up and up, players did get a little bit better. And that's like kind of the difference between having Nocturne with and without the +1 range, right? It's like the games where you hit Victor versus the games where you don't. But we'll cover how to play all the S tier comps. In the A tier, like my favorite two are going to be the Family and Bruiser comps. These are really fun to play. If I get an artifact item that's really good for Violet, such as Suspicious Trenchcoat, I'll definitely go for Family. Bruiser Mundo, if I get Bruiser Emblem. I recently played a game where I had 2 Bruiser Emblems in Stage 2. It was pretty fun, but you only need one of them. But going for a Twitch Mundo with Bruisers combination is definitely very viable. A Form Swapper Gangplank, very underrated comp, I think. Form Swappers have always been good. It's just a little awkward to play, but I think right now Gangplank is in a pretty solid spot and might surprise a bunch of people. Tristana Reroll, pretty good stuff there. Ziggs Reroll. Ziggs is actually so OP, I think, but the reroll comp where you play him is a bit tricky because he's a 2-cost and there aren't really other 2-costs you look for when you go for Ziggs Reroll. And that's what I think is holding it back the most. Enforcer Vi, if you get the Enforcer emblem, solid. Same with Conqueror, Scrap, same thing. Blackrose, a bit further down in the list right now. And then we have finally Urgot Reroll. There are 2 comps for this. There's the Sentinel Urgot comp, and then there's also the Bronze for Life version. The Bronze for Life version, you can just play without having Bronze for Life, but it is definitely recommended. Emissary Nami, it's okay. And then Pit Fighter Vi. In the B tier, we have Experiment Twitch. Like, do not play Twitch unless you have the Bruiser Mundo comp going for you. There might be some variants out there with like Force Sniper. I've seen some people try that. As for like what the best version of it is, like most people have been doing it with Watchers from what I've seen. But I wouldn't really go for it unless you have the emblem for it. The rest of the comps in the B tier, they're just kind of better versions of these comps out there. Same with the C tier that you would kind of just ignore that. For like the special stuff, Menaces is still very good. Powder is a pretty solid unit. What Could Have Been also still doing pretty well. And then why not both? Again, I think the Form Swappers are a pretty underrated comp right now. And then there are a bunch of other decently playable stuff down here. But comps to one trick, we talked about this before, but like Ambessa Corki, Heimer Flex, Rebel Zoe, Scrap Corki also possible. Exodia comps is going to be like the other comps in the S tier right now, like especially +1 range Nocturne or 6 Automata Nocturne, completely bonkers stuff. And then good beginner comps, probably going to be Family or just any emblem comp that you get on Stage 2-1. Like if you're a beginner, I'd highly recommend checking out the coaching video we did before and also my live stream later today. I'm probably going to be streaming right after I post this video, where I'm going to be going through more viewer games that people have submitted. But starting off with the top comp, Emissary Corki, we got the Emissary version, we got the Sentinel version. I prefer the Emissary version a lot more, but it's a little more difficult to hit. There are actually 2 versions of this comp, and then there's also the version with Rumble over here. You swap out 3 units in the front line. You go from Gangplank, Vi, and Swain over to Rumble, Rel, and Vladimir. It's nice because you get Watcher and stuff too. It's pretty good in that sense, but if you do get Rumble, you do need to make a few substitutions like that, but the most important part about this build is getting 4 Emissary. I like taking either Garen or Ambessas off of Carousel with priority to Garen because everyone plays Garen. If we go to teamfight.lol and then go to stats champions, type in forecast, we can see that he is actually one of the top 3 most popular forecast units. Well, Ambessa's not too far behind, but you really need both of them. So getting one off Carousel, finding the other one on the roll down definitely is going to be the way to go. And then you can run whichever version you hit. I personally play this one a lot more. The reason why is because you don't need to play around any legendary units, and therefore it's a bit cheaper to play, so you can hit this board more reliably. And you can kind of flex out based on what you hit. So if you have Vi 2, great. If not, you could play it with like Gangplank and Swain at level 8 instead. Sometimes I front row my Gangplank 2 if I need more tanks, even though he isn't that tanky in the front line. The main damage dealers of this comp is going to be Corki and Ambessa. Start out your early game with some sort of like frontline backline, like some people use Sentinels, some people even use like Pit Fighters. Doing like a Violet plus Draven is pretty good because Draven can hold all the Corki items, Violet can hold all the Ambessa items. Urgot's pretty good because he could fill both roles in that sense. So there are a couple of different options there in the early game. You could also play the Sentinel version if you are not able to hit the Emissaries. So this one's just going to be 6 Sentinel plus some people in the back. And you could also duo carry with Heimerdinger if you so choose to. This specific comp is pretty much the same thing as the Heimer Flex comp, but this one's more focused on the Corki rather than the Heimerdinger. But both versions works. It just depends on what items you hit early game and what units you hit in case you do not get the Emissaries. The next comp up we have is Rebel Zoe. I personally have a love-hate relationship with this comp. For anyone who watched my last video, we went over how good the comp is at 7 Rebel with and without Jinx 1 and 2 star, and the difference is very stark. I'll do it again over here just in case people missed it, but essentially with Jinx and 2 star, you're going to be averaging a 2.75 in Diamond Plus, but if you only have her at 1 star, you're going to drop down to a 5.01. And you could already imagine if you do not have Jinx at all, you're going to be doing pretty badly with 7 Rebel. So what does that mean for us? It means that we need to absolutely have a ton of gold whenever you are going for Rebel Zoe. And if you see Jinx off Carousel, you absolutely need to grab her, because she is just that critical in the comp. Obviously, if you have the emblem, it's a bit more forgiving, but really without Jinx, you're asking for a lot of trouble. So another thing you want to do is make sure you're absolutely win streaking when you are playing this comp, because it's just really troublesome otherwise. For the anomaly, I like having Alawi anomaly as my favorite, because I think having a tank line is just the most important thing whenever you're playing this. So getting triple tank item on Alawi plus tank anomaly buys so much time for your Jinx and Zoe to just get all their casts off and AoE the backline that is pretty much unplayable without a tanky Alawi. Like Alawi 2 star is probably the most important unit apart from Jinx, obviously, but like Jinx 2, like that's a legendary, we can't rely on that. So in most of my games, I'm trying to use Alawi, go to level 9 with that, and then find the Jinx there. But not to say Jinx 1 is bad, you just need to eventually find Jinx 2. Like Jinx 1, great if you get her early, but later on it's like you need to upgrade her in order to do really well. But overall, this comp is just like pretty solid overall, but it does require some luck in my opinion. For a more consistent comp, like Heimerdinger Flex is probably going to be a bit better. You could play it with either Sentinels or Academy or any mix in between. There's also the Blackrose version if you want to go for that. All versions are decently viable. I think like the Academy or Sentinel versions are a bit better though, which is why I have them up here at the top. But it's going to depend on what your Academy items are on what you run, and whether you hit the Sentinels or not. Like some games you hit Rumble, some games you hit Jace, so whichever one happens, that's the one you play with. If you play around Corki, great. slap all your AD items on him, slap all your AP items on Heimerdinger, and also like don't forget your front line as well. In this comp, unlike the Rebel comp where I like the tank anomaly on Alawi, don't get me wrong, it's still good if you get an Alawi anomaly, but I do prefer anomalying my Heimerdinger. Heimerdinger works really well with anything mana because he is a visionary unit, so stuff like Kill Streak, really good, Nothing Wasted, couple other ones that are pretty solid. I do make a note of them down here, pretty much anything with mana you want. And after blue buff can be Shojin or blue buff. I normally just build a Shojin on Heimerdinger because when I build Shojin in the early game, I use it to flex between like Silco, Heimer, Zoe, things like that. So that's why I often have a Spear Shojin whenever I play Heimerdinger. But if I were to handpick my items with Pandora's items or something like that, blue buff would definitely be my first choice. But since either mana item pretty much is the same, the most important item I like prioritizing on Heimerdinger is Archangel Staff. I'd much rather have Spear Shojin plus Archangels than blue buff plus some other damage item or another AP item. The reason why is because with the Sentinel frontline, you end up getting a ton of Archangel stacks on your Heimerdinger that he goes absolutely bonkers blasting everyone. So very important item to have, and it uses a tier. So sometimes if you get 2 tiers, you build a blue buff, you don't get another tier, so you can't build Archangels. It's a little tricky when that happens. So don't be afraid to build Spear Shojin on Heimerdinger. It's not as good as blue buff, but if you can get Archangels with it, I think that's his most important item, just because of the way the comp works. But just fast 8 on this comp, any combination of Sentinel and Academy or Blackrose if you do get those units for free, and you are going to be more than good to go. Next build up we have is Quickstriker Nocturne. I really only play this if I get +1 range on my Nocturne. If you don't get that, it's still okay to play, but you need to get Nocturne 3-star for free. Like if I don't have 6 Nocturnes by stage 3-1 without rolling, okay, maybe that's exaggerating a bit. If I don't have 5 Nocturnes by stage 3-1 without rolling, I'm probably not going to go for Nocturne 3-star unless I have +1 range. But if you get it for free, you could just build like the regular frontline items that we have here, like QSS, like crit build's really good on him, so you go like IE Hand of Justice. But really, the builds you want to do are just going to be anything with artifact items, namely, again, the things that give +1 range. So like Rapid Fire Cannon, Fishbone, Sniper Focus, really good stuff. If we look at all items and then look at average placement, for example, for things with like a decent sample size, you'll see that like it's these 3 items. Let's bump this up to like 1,000. Pretty much every Ornn item. Giant Slayer is also really good. And then like Sniper's Emblem, decent. And then we kind of get into the regular items after that. But all I'm trying to say is there's a very big difference between like Fishbone's Nocturne and like Quicksilver Nocturne, you know? Like you really want to have him in the back, nice and safe, and just AoEing everyone down. But 2-cost reroll pattern for this. When I watched a lot of the coaching games in my previous video, I did notice a lot of people don't actually know how to reroll. So make sure you actually follow this leveling guide when you do go for this reroll or any other reroll. There's one at the top of the site too up here, bunnymuffins.lol, and then like the leveling button over here. And following that guide will allow you to get a lot more gold when you do play for Nocturne, and ideally hit him 3-star in many more cases. But again, the main takeaway from this video for this comp is that you need the artifact items, or you get +1 automata and then go 6 automata. That's going to be a really good win condition as well. Next build up we have is Chem-Baron Cashout. Chem-Baron Cashout is just going to be played with a 500 Cashout, and it pretty much is auto win. And when I say auto win, like I don't mean literally auto win. If you have a 500 Chem-Baron Cashout and you face a 3-star legendary unit, you will not win. Like, I'm sorry to say it, but like there's a comment here that said, I got 500 Cashout, Renni 3-star, perfect, Shimmer Bloom, and lost to 10 Rebel, so you're not guaranteed to win. And like I did say, you are guaranteed to win with this. It's a figure of speech. Like, please use brain a little bit, because yeah, they lost to 10 Rebel, and 10 Rebel is another auto win. So when one auto win faces another auto win, like one of them has to lose, you know? Like I don't know what to tell people. But if you want the best comp in the game, for sure, like I'll show you what it is really quickly. What you want to do is reset board and put in all these units and make them all 3-star. So that's how you get the, okay, screw it, 4-star. I don't even know if that's possible, probably not. But this is going to be the best board and best comps in the entire game, but we don't get those every time, so that's why we have to settle for the tier list you find on bunnymuffins.lol/meta. But back to this comp, just make sure you lose streak whenever you did play this. Do stuff like frontlining your range units in the early game, trapping your melee units in the back line. Make sure you lose. Other people will try to grief you. It's okay. It happens sometimes. You could still make it to 500 in some cases if you have War on the Undercity, or if you get Chem-Baron emblem and also hit early units such as like an early Silco. So don't lose hope whenever you are playing this, but you do have to kind of risk it for the biscuit. Keep in mind, if people do grief you, they often go 7th while you go 8th, so it's technically not that worth it in a lot of cases. It depends when they grief you. If they grief you in stage 2, like, they're probably fine, but if people try to grief you in like stage 3, they're normally griefing their own game. So that's one thing to keep in mind whenever you are playing that. Next comp up we have is Renata Reroll. Renata is going to be a comp you go for if you get a lot of copies of Singe and Renata in the early game, hence the name of the comp. And you also want to make sure that you are uncontested. If you are contested, it doesn't mean like give up and let the other person have it. It means you have to analyze the situation and see if you have a better spot than them. So if you have more Renatas in them, or maybe you have a reroll augment such as Pandora's Bench or Prismatic Ticket, then it's probably fine to go for. But if you don't have either of those and they have it instead, or they have more Renatas than you, then you probably have to give it up and go for something else. Luckily, the Renata's items work in a lot of different builds. You could go into the Dominator build, you could go into Heimerdinger builds, like pretty much anything that's AP oriented, it's going to be good on. But in this comp, you want to just focus on getting a very, very strong front line and Archangel Staff in the back, and eventually Renata will take over the fight as she shields everyone and keeps everyone alive to allow her to keep stacking and stacking and stacking. It's like a pretty interesting stall comp, and it's also decently fun to play, and you could also get a lot of interesting variations on this board. For example, we're running 7 different 1 and 2 cost units, so you could literally reroll and get any of them 3-star and play some variation of them, obviously like Renata being the main person. But in terms of the tanks, it could be any of the other ones in front. If you get a lot of items, you could definitely itemize Vex or Morgana in the back. I prefer Morgana a little bit. I feel like Vex is a little bit worse than her, but obviously if you 3-star Vex versus 2-star Morgana, itemize the Vex. And then in the super late game, you could play stuff like Rumble or Malzahar as well. So that's going to be like a good late game cap to this. For the anomaly, focus on stuff like Magic Training, Force of Friendship, Touch of Frost, all pretty good. Fireball is also pretty decent, but any AP or mana for Renata is pretty good. And I'd say pretty much always go for Renata, unless you get Ultimate Hero for Singe. I think Ultimate Hero Singe is pretty funny and also really, really good. But items for Renata, like Archangel mandatory, Shojin mandatory, third item could be anything. Nashor's is pretty nice because it allows her to cast a lot quicker. But I'd say the first 2 items are the only 2 things that you absolutely must have. Tank items for Singe, like it could be anything, but go for like pure tank items. Don't go for like utility tank items because you really need them just to be super beefy. So just keep that in mind as you play this. Next build up we have is the Dominators. Dominators are always like pretty solid to go for. Like a lot of people play this without the emblem. It's perfectly fine to do. Obviously I prefer playing with the emblem, but you don't have to have that. My favorite part about this comp is actually the early game because Ziggs is an absolute monster. You can play Ziggs in so many different ways, and he is the best item holder for Silco by far. My favorite is whenever I have a Morellonomicon or a red buff on Ziggs because he is one of the best appliers of it in the game. I'd say 2-star Ziggs is better than 1-star Silco for sure. And it says 3 mini bombs fly out when he throws his thing. I swear it's more. I swear he applies his anti-heal to everyone whenever he casts it. But get a red buff plus a mana item on him and he will carry you throughout like stage 4. Like I promise you, I've done it. I've seen other players do it. Ziggs 2-star can actually hold his own on stage 4. It's absolutely nuts. But obviously if you get Silco 2, you replace him. But the main power of this comp in the late game, like where you get a lot of the wins, is from Mordekaiser. Mordekaiser is a little bit tricky. His main item or his best item is actually something that's very unintuitive. It's going to be Edge of Night. This just allows him to get a ton of casts off. Also, I should put him on the side here. Let me update the image. You want him on the edge where your main damage dealers are because he gives you damage amplification, or the 4 units that he hits are going to take bonus damage. So you always want him on the same side as your other carries. But you could use a lot of different sets of items on Mordekaiser. The best one probably going to be like Nashor's Tooth, because he casts and you want him to auto as much as possible. Like Nashor's Tooth does exactly that. Some form of healing item is okay. Like he has built-in healing as well, which makes him really, really good. He gets 30% Omnivamp and +1 range. So while BT or Hextech Gunblade are definitely viable, they're not mandatory by any means, but anything that gives AP or damage is going to be really good. But Edge of Night, I'd say, is his most important one. And then honestly, things that make him cast faster, such as like Adaptive Helm, also gives AP, or Protector's Vow, definitely work on him too. Like I've actually seen Protector's Vow Mordekaiser go absolutely nuts just because he gets his cast off early and kills things a little bit quicker. But like honestly, anything works. I'm just trying to give you some of those like weird options that you wouldn't think of. Obviously, Hat's really good, Titan's Resolve really good, like any of the regular damage items are good, but I want to give you some other options like QSS, also pretty nasty. But the main part of this comp is just going to be doing a fast 8 or fast 9 leveling pattern. You want to stabilize with either like the Ziggs or like the Silco, and then some semblance of a front line. Most people pair Dominator with Blackrose, very solid stuff. +1 Dominator makes the comp a lot easier to play because you don't need to hit Mordekaiser to get to 6 Dominator. And you could also do 6 Dominator without the emblem too, but this one we show 4 with 5 Blackrose, but you could easily take out 2 Blackrose units such as Morgana and someone else in order to fit in Ziggs and Blitzcrank, but it's by no means necessary. Like it just depends on who's doing most of your carrying. Like if I do have a absolutely cranked out Mordekaiser, like I'd probably prefer 6 Dominator just because you want to buff him up as much as possible. But if you're focused more on like Silco and you need more frontline, then Blackrose probably going to be a little bit better. But you could do some wacky things with this comp. For example, with the emblem, you don't have to use Elise. She's just the most common unit to use it on. If you want to take it up to the next level, try out Dominator Malzahar, very, very nice stuff. Dominator LeBlanc, also very, very good, but we don't always get the legendaries every game. That's why I defaulted to Elise. But general rule for all TFT, emblems are good on any legendary, more so than most other champions. So that's just one thing to kind of keep in mind. Next build up, we have this Kogmaw Scar reroll. Speaking of emblems, like you only want to play this if you have +1 Automata or if you have Kogmaw 3-star for free for some reason, because getting 6 Automata is just absolutely broken. It just adds so much damage to your team for pretty much no reason. And you could also just main tank your Blitzcrank and be pretty happy with that. Just make sure you always run 2 Sniper with this. So the base of the comp is going to be Kogmaw, Zeri, and Scar. Those 3 you pretty much always play. And a Mumu. Sorry, those 4. And then after that, just add in as many Automatas as you can, as many Watchers as you can, or as many Firelights as you can. And we have each of those versions up here. And you can play this with a variety of different emblems. Like obviously the best one's going to be this one, but if you ever get 2 of them, or you're not sure what to take on a late game carousel, like Watcher or Firelight, very, very deadly stuff. And then you want to focus, and then you want to turn your focus to your Kogmaw's items. So Kogmaw items are pretty simple. It's the same thing every time. Archangel, Hextech Gunblade, and Rageblade. I'd say the only replacements you can make is to the Rageblade. Rageblade can either be blue buff or Shojin, or even a Nashor's Tooth in some cases. You essentially just need one item that helps him stack, which is like the Rageblade in this case, but the other items also help with that because blue buff makes him cast faster, same with Shojin, same with Nashor's, but Rageblade just does it the best. And then you need the AP stacking item in the Archangels, nothing else really replaces that. And then healing from the Hextech Gunblade is just a really good effect to have whenever you have so much stacking, because you just auto heal everyone permanently for the rest of the fight once he gets enough stacks. So that's why this item combo is really good. But again, you could replace the Rageblade for something else. It does get a little weird like that. After that, focus on getting tank items on either Scar or Blitzcrank. It's going to depend on what you do. If I do the 6 Automata version, I like making Blitz my main tank. If I'm doing Watchers or Firelight, then it's going to be Scar. And whoever is your main tank, make sure you put pure tank items on them. None of this like Ionic Spark Redemption nonsense. Put that on your off tank, because you really just need your main tank to live as long as possible so that Kogmaw can get as many stacks as possible and then heal him back up with the Hextech Gunblade effect. But very good comp, just a little bit situational because you need like a +1 emblem or something wacky like that. Onto the A tiers, we have Family. The best version is going to be with Pit Fighters, but a lot of people are sleeping on Powder, and I don't know what it is. When I did my coaching video the other week, and I saw someone play Family, they didn't frontline their Powder. So what that tells me is that people are not going to bunnymuffins.lol/meta to look at the team comps before they play them, because if you did, you know you should frontline your Powder. instead of putting her in the back. I think that's like mistake number one, because her in the front is absolutely devastating because she just does so much damage. You could even itemize her up and play Ambusher. Like, one thing I really like doing with this build, because we have the 6 Pit Fighter version going on right now, is you could always add an Echo or any Ambusher, but Echo's going to be the best one because he's also a scrap unit, and she will just crit the entire enemy front line, no questions asked. And so whenever you're in those places where you're like, oh, I could only fit in 4 Pit Fighter, I can't fit in 6 yet, what do I put in when I level up? Just throw in an Ambusher. Any of them will do. It could be like Camille, Smeech, whoever, and you'll just see the power of Powder. She just blasts everyone, and like you could put items on her too. Like, any of your AP items go on her, because like this comp doesn't really use AP that well because Draven only uses Rage Blade, but sometimes you don't get Draven 3, and therefore if you get 2 rods, you just jam a hat on Powder. Very solid stuff. Hand of Justice is good, Guard Breaker is good, anything with crit is good when you have the Ambusher buff active, because Ambusher allows your abilities to critically strike. So if you are able to give her any glove item, she is just gonna crit even harder. So like Hand of Justice and Guard Breaker, probably 2 of my favorite things. But one thing to watch out for when you do play this comp, and it's going to depend on what level you are. I'd say if you are in Diamond or below, you could just play Family every game. I'm not even like lying when I say that. But once you get higher than that, you kind of need to find specific situations to play Family. Those situations are going to be getting artifact items or a Family emblem or augment. So if you have +1 Family and can go for 4 Family, great. Hard Forces comp. If you could get a very good artifact item for Violet, she is one of the best users for artifact items right now, like Silvermere Dawn, incredibly good. Suspicious Trenchcoat that we talked about before, like any of the regular Bruiser ones, such as like Death's Defiance, very nice stuff. Then you could go for this build, but if not, if you're like above Diamond, then I would kind of not go for this unless you get one of those conditions that I talked about there. But no matter what, as much as I've been like gassing up Powder, for your anomaly, you want to focus on Violet, just because she is going to be the main carry of your team. Next build up we have is going to be Bruiser Mundo. This is just a Twitch build with Mundo, 3 experiment, that's all you need, and then all the Bruisers in the world, and then 2 sniper in the back line. Dominator's kind of optional, so you could run Silco or do something like a Jace instead. If you manage to get the legendaries, Jace is going to be a bit better. But if you get a lot of AP items, you have to turn your Elise into an AP unit or use Silco. But essentially the times you want to go for this comp is only when you get the Bruiser emblem, because if not, it's just a completely useless build. I typically only go for this if I see Bruiser at the very start of the game, and then I just hard force this comp. But I'm sure there are situations when you're building for Corki, like you built an early IE or something like that, and then you see Bruiser emblem in like stage 3, you could pivot into this Mundo build. But it's just a fast 8 comp, 4 cost units going to be the name of the game, and pretty simple after that. The most important ones, I know we have 4 cost units out there, but the only 2 important ones are going to be Mundo and Twitch. Getting them to 2-star is worlds of a difference, whereas 1 and 2-star Elise, like, yeah, obviously I'd rather have 2-star Elise. Like, I'd rather have $1,000 in my bank account than 100, right? Like, no kidding. But if I were to roll hard for something, it would only be for Mundo and Twitch. And then obviously Silco, not that important because Dominator isn't that important, but if you have a bunch of AP items for some reason, because sometimes the game gives you that, then you kind of have to make use of them through him. Next build up we have is Form Swapper, Gangplank, and Swain. If you get 3-star Gangplank or 3-star Swain, they are absolute monsters. Like, Swain could be a frontline or a backliner. Gangplank, usually I just leave him in the backline, but if you get them 3-star and you hit Jace, like, you pretty much always get a good game. I forget what this average is. It's either like 2.9 or something like that, or like low 3s, like a 3.2, somewhere around there. But there are a lot of requirements to make this build work. But pretty much the base of the comp is just going to be 4 Form Swapper. Like, you don't need any of the Pit Fighters. Oh, sorry, you need one of them, but it doesn't really matter who it is. And then you just build around whoever your carries are. So sometimes people like playing this with Nami. We'll go over the Nami comp in a little bit. Sometimes you could run like a scrap unit with the Gangplank, but running at least 1 Pit Fighter probably going to be pretty crucial there. So you could do something like Urgot plus Corki. That's pretty good if you have a lot of AD items, and then you could use Jace as a tank in that case, because then you're lacking a little bit in the frontline department. Of course, you could still go full into Pit Fighters as we saw before, or you could just run a random assortment of like legendary units plus whoever you have here and kind of use that to play out your game, because again, the comp is really flexible. It's just really It's just really 4-form swapper plus anything else you can find. And the rest of the team honestly doesn't matter too much. But it really revolves around hitting Jace. So if you see a random Jace early on, if like you're level 7, 3, 5, and then you natural it before stage 4 happens, you could consider going for like a Gangplank 3 Swain 4-form swapper build. It doesn't happen all the time, which is why this comp is much lower on the tier list. It doesn't mean it's weak, it just means it's a little rare to kind of play. Next build up we have is Tristana Reroll, just 2 cost reroll there. Trist Emissary, Trist Sentinel, both comps work. It's very similar to the Corki stuff that we saw before in terms of what you play. Like if you hit the Emissaries, great. If not, like you obviously can only settle for the Sentinels, but items for Trist is just going to be IE Rageblade +1. Corki I kind of like using as the utility item holder with Red Buff and Last Whisper. Next build up we have is Dominator Ziggs. This one is going to just be very similar to the other Dominator comp, except you just use Ziggs carry, and you pretty much always try to go for 6 Dominator, even if you don't have the emblem. And the reason why is because Ziggs is normally the unit that you take out with the emblem, but in this case, we're playing him as our main carry, so you kind of have to keep him in. The most important item, I think, is going to be the Jeweled Gauntlet, because Dominators get a lot of AP, so you want to crit with it a lot and take advantage of the free stacking. Like Dominators pretty much have built-in Archangel staff, so getting critical strike chance or damage amp is really good whenever you play them, so that's why you want to itemize that way. Enforcer Vi Caitlyn. This one's a bit of a rare comp too, but it happens every now and then. I see it a couple times, but you can only play this if you get Enforcer Emblem early on and then hit Caitlyn. It plays very, very similarly to the Rebel build, but it's a little less consistent because I think the mid game is not as strong. If you compare the Enforcer build to the Rebel build, like look at this board, try to picture it in your mind, and then when we go up to Rebel, we're gonna see that we got Illaoi and Zoe to kind of carry us through the game, right? Like they do a very good job of that. And before we hit Jinx, they're gonna be our go-to team members, right? But if we look at the Enforcer build, it's like Vi, yeah, she's solid, right? But like she's only 1 unit, and if you build items for Caitlyn, which you do want to do, by the way, your item holder for that is gonna be like Maddie, Twitch, or Zeri. Neither of which are that great, so they don't stabilize you as hard. And also your front line is complete garbage because you're running like Loris as your main tank, and he's just a 3 cost unit. He's not a 4 cost unit. You honestly have to pair this with an Illaoi in the mid game before you hit the 8 Enforcer board in a lot of cases, or play it with like Elise with the Bruisers with Steb. But even then, like the front line just isn't as strong as the Rebel version, so it kind of comes lacking at that point there. But once you do hit the Caitlyn, like your entire game is saved and you could definitely like start win streaking after that. It's just a little bit harder to get to that point with this build compared to the Rebel build. Conqueror, really fun stuff. For some reason, a lot of people have been asking me how to play the Conqueror build, but I pretty much say the same thing every time. All you need to do is start the game with 4 Conqueror with an emblem. I don't really play it in any other way, and I also have to have like either a Draven 2-star or a Gangplank 2-star or someone that complements them that's a 2-star. So for example, I could have like 1-star Draven, 1-star Darius, but I have 2-star Violet or like 2-star Amumu to kind of complement them at 2-1. That way you can get your Conqueror stacks up really, really quickly and then kind of blow through everyone after that. And in the late game, the comp is still really, really good because you could just swap your Ambessa items over onto Mordekaiser, and then Mordekaiser becomes an absolute monster. You could also swap your Conqueror spat onto any legendary unit. They will do really, really well because Conqueror, this trait just gives you a lot of stats, AD and AP. So what unit doesn't care about AD and AP, right? Like very few don't. So you could pretty much always find a use for it, but the board is pretty flexible in the late game. But it's just 6 Conqueror plus anything you could play. And that's going to be that. Like Twisted Fate, obviously a very strong recommendation because he gives you Quickstriker for Ambessa. But apart from that, like literally anyone can do, depending on who you are using as your carry. So pay attention to who you itemize, build around that person. In the early game, it's most likely going to be Draven, so try to play some pit fighters. In the mid game, it's going to be the Ambessa, so try to play like at least 1 Quickstriker. And then in the late game, it's Mordekaiser, so maybe add in a Dominator if you do end up playing around him. Next build up, we have his Scrap Corki. This one is just going to be 6 Scrap plus anything. And this build is good because you pretty much get perfect items every time. You just need IE Last Whisper for Corki or like a red buff on Corki, and then just add components to random units on your team that are Scrap. They turn them into full items and you don't really have to think too much about them. Late game is going to be the Rumble. I only play this with some sort of scrap augment though, either like a +1 emblem or like a top of the scrap heap. Not saying the comp is bad, but unless you get it completely for free, I think the Sentinel Corki version is a bit better, so that's one thing to keep in mind. But if your items are absolute garbage, like you could play the scrap version just to spread out the components, just because it's kind of easier to play like that. Next build up we have is Blackrose Flex. If you go AP and you can't hit the Heimerdinger Sentinel board, or you can't hit the Dominator board, go for one of these versions instead with like Heimerdinger backline, Elise backline, the Malzahar backline's very good still, and sometimes even the Zoe backline. This one's going to be the worst one, but you hit what you hit that game, right? Like, it's not my main go-to AP comp, but if you have to do it, then you have to do it. I also like playing this if I ever get +1 Visionary from the emblem, because it's a lot easier to fit in 4 Visionary in this build compared to some of the other versions. Next one up we have is Urgot Reroll. This is the new comp of the week. We're going to go over the Bronze for Life version first, but essentially both of these revolve around 4 Artillerists, and the Bronze for Life one, you run 3 Experiment. People go for Nunu and Zyra the most, and then you put Zyra and Urgot on the Experiment hexes. Then, since Urgot's a 2-star, you want to reroll Tristana as well. They complement each other pretty easily because they're both Artillerists, and Tristana's good single target damage, Urgot's good at tanking, and you essentially use Urgot as like a drain tank with the Bloodthirster and the Sterix, and he actually does a pretty solid job of it. Like, trust me, like, you won't believe it. Like, play this comp if you do get the right spots for it, such as getting free Urgot 2s early on in the game, and if you are uncontested, and it will surprise you. This is probably like one of the most underrated comps, I think, like, because people thought it was a meme build before, and it is true. The Urgot build where he eats another character was completely a meme build. It wasn't good at all. People just played it because it was fun, and people made videos about it because it was fun. But this version focused on like a tanky Urgot, and you like choose like a tank anomaly on him, actually does pretty solidly. Like, you'd be surprised. Like, try it out before you trash talk it, because yeah, or like watch someone else play it and it'll be quite impressive. But most people go for 4 Artillerists. You could use like Tristana, Corki as your backline, and ironically enough, this is like one of the only comps where Gangplank is used in the front. The reason why is because you just need more tanks in the front, so that's why you just throw them up there. But like pretty much in every other comp, Gangplank's always in the back. There's also the Sentinel version here with Rel and Leona, sometimes used as the main tank. So if you get a lot of tank items, it's good to run this comp, because normally when you play this build, you need a lot of swords. You need the swords for Tristana, you need the swords for Urgot, but some games you don't get them all the time. So if you get like tons of chain vests, belts, and Negatrons, like Leona and Rel gonna be great candidates to hold those if you 3-star them also. But I prefer this version more, but they are both playable. It depends on what you hit. Next build up we have is Emissary, Sorcerer, Nami. If you get Nami 3 and Swain 3, it's a little hard to do right now because a lot of people are going for the Emissary builds, and getting Nami 3 is a bit impossible. Luckily, you could do a Swain carry, so you just drop Swain in the back and put the AP items on him, but I don't think it's as good. So I would kind of avoid this comp unless you know a lot of people are not going for other Emissary units. Pitfighter Vi, if you get +1 Pitfighter and you can't go Violet, this is a version to kind of play, where you just have Vi and someone else with the Pitfighter emblem hard carry your team. A lot of people can use it. And this version is using Ambessa, but you could honestly use any melee carry. So if we look at like the late game melee carries, you could do stuff like Mordekaiser, you could do stuff like Rumble, Echo, Ambessa. You know what a really cool trick is to do? Go to items, stats, items, and then type in Pitfighter over here. You could see like a lot of sample users of it, and like, oh yeah, I forgot about Jace. But pretty much like, again, the rule from before applies. Like, any legendary unit is going to use it really, really well. If you want to get more advanced with this and want to check out the best Pitfighter user without Violet 3-star, is you can just type in Violet here and exclude her and see who uses the item the most and who performs the best with it. So Ambessa uses it the most, performs okay on it, nothing great, right? But all the legendaries do pretty solidly after that. Next build up we have are the B tiers. Experiment Twitch, like, probably don't want to play too much Twitch in this version here. Like, I personally love this build, but it's just not the time for it right now. Not as strong, same with everything else here. But that's going to be it for all the main comps. As for the special comps, they are still in the tier list. They're just at the bottom. So head on over to the website, bunnymuffins.lol/meta, if you do want to check out some of the stuff with hero augments and things like that, the trait augments. But how am I going to be approaching the patch? It's pretty simple. Like, I'm gonna look for a bonkers S tier angle. Like, all these comps up here, such as Nocturne, Chem-Baron, Kogmaw, Scar, Reroll, like those 3 comps I think are like the Exodia comps right now, but you don't get them all the time. But if I do get a start from them, I'll just hard force them if I get like a good artifact for them. If not, some of the emblem comps are really good. Dominator is going to be my favorite, Rebel second favorite, and then if I have AP items, I'm just going to default Heimerdinger Flex or Dominators. Sometimes Rebels if you want, but Rebels are a bit weird. They kind of use all sorts of different things. And then if I have AD items, try to go for some Corki build because it's just a comp you could easily one trick, and there are also many different versions of this too. But let's go to the comment of the week. As I've said before in previous videos, I'm trying to answer as many comments as I can because I feel like I haven't done the best job of it in recent years. So leave any question you have down in the comments below. No stupid questions, and I'll try to answer as many as I can. The one that I like the most from this week is, I have a serious question. Why do you not keep your bench filled with champions if it won't affect your econ? Like buying 3 2-stars if you have them in your shop. I think he means 2 cost units. And you're at 46 gold at the end of the round. It'll increase the odds of your desired champions in the next roll. So what he's talking about is champion pools. So in case you didn't know, TFT has limited amounts of units in the pool. So for 2 costs, they're only 25. For 3 costs, 18. 4 costs, 10. 5 costs, 9. So let's say you're going for Renata reroll and you want Renata, but you see a Zeri in your shop. Zeri is a 2 cost unit. If you buy her, there's a higher chance for Renata to show up in your shop, right? The thing is, you could do what this person says, and there's nothing wrong with it. In a theoretical world, you do buy every unit in your shop as long as it doesn't cost you interest, but people do not play like computers. So if you ever mess up a roll down because you're too slow because there are too many units on your bench and you couldn't buy a unit without selling one, and then you don't finish your roll down on time, I'd say don't do this if you're a bit slow on your roll downs. But if you're super fast, human reflexes and stuff like that, quick thinker, and don't get confused at all and never mess up a roll down, then yeah, buy every unit in your shop. In case you're wondering, like, what do the best players in the world do? They do this most of the time. They try to buy as many units as they can, but I know some players, they don't do it at all. They call it like clear your bench, clear your mind. That's a popular saying in TFT, and I've noticed like it doesn't really matter which one you do as long as you're comfortable with it. And unless you're literally competing for the world championship, like, you probably don't need to do it at all. And even then, like, the differences are very negligible. So if there's even like a 1% chance it affects any part of your other play, it's probably not worth to do. Of course, if there are important units to hold on your bench, like, definitely do that. But this person's mainly talking about like useless units that you're not going to play at all. Second comment of the week was, I had to finish my gooning before I should start the video. I'm not really too sure what this is referring to, so if anyone can clear that up, let me know down in the comments below. But that's going to be it for me today. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and leave whatever comments and questions you have in the comment section, but like, try to keep them like at least like semi-serious if you can. I'll of course respond to everything, but if you want to get featured, there's a higher chance to get featured if you ask a serious question. But that's going to be it for me today. Hope to see you all on my live stream a little bit later. I'm going to stream like once a week and just go through the coaching videos that people send in. So if you want to see a lot of common mistakes that people make, or like how to play certain comps that you don't necessarily look at and try to see real game examples, definitely tune into that. I'll do it on like Twitch and YouTube. I'm going to try to multi-stream. I've never done that before, but hopefully it works out and I don't mess up the technology. But that's going to be it for me today. Hopefully I'll see you all next time.